Ivan IV Vasilievich, known to history as Ivan the Terrible, stands as one of the most complex and controversial figures in Russia's long and turbulent story. Born on August 25, 1530, in the village of Kolomenskoye near Moscow, Ivan entered the world into a family of immense power and fragile stability. His father, Grand Prince Vasily III, ruled the Grand Duchy of Moscow, but the succession was uncertain until Ivan's birth. His mother, Elena Glenskaya, was of Lithuanian and Serbian noble heritage, and she quickly became a powerful influence in the young prince's early years. Ivan's childhood, however, was marked by tragedy and political chaos. In 1533, when Ivan was just 3 years old, his father died, leaving him the nominal ruler of Muscovy. The regency fell to his mother, but her position was contested by ambitious boyar families. For 5 years, Elena Glenskaya ruled as regent, continuing her husband's policies and working to strengthen central authority. Then, in 1538, she died suddenly, possibly poisoned, leaving an orphan at the age of 8. Her death plunged the court into a vicious power struggle among the boyar nobility. Ivan was subjected to neglect, humiliation, and even physical abuse by the noble families who vied for influence. These formative years left deep scars, instilling in him a profound distrust of the aristocracy. Witnessing the cruelty and greed of those who should have protected him, Ivan developed a determination to crush their power once he came of age. By the time he reached his teenage years, Ivan had grown into a highly intelligent but volatile young man. He had a keen interest in theology, history, and military affairs, but his temper was quick and often violent. In 1547, at the age of 16, Ivan made history by assuming the title of Tsar of all Russia. This coronation was unprecedented. It transformed the ruler of Muscovy into an autocrat whose authority was divinely ordained. The title of Tsar was intended to link his rule to that of the Byzantine emperors, reinforcing the idea of Moscow as the Third Rome. Ivan's early reign was surprisingly progressive and reform-minded. He convened the First Zemsky Sobor, a national assembly representing various social classes. He introduced a new law code, the Sudebnik of 1550, which aimed to standardize justice and limit the arbitrary power of local governors. He reorganized the military, creating a more professional standing army known as the Streltsy. Local self-government was expanded through the election of elders to administer rural districts. In 1547, Ivan married Anastasia Romanovna, a union that brought him personal happiness and political stability. Anastasia's influence seemed to temper his volatile nature, encouraging moderation and justice. With her by his side, Ivan embarked on projects to modernize and expand his realm. In 1552, Ivan led a successful campaign against the Khanate of Kazan, a Tatar state that had long been a threat to Muscovy. The conquest of Kazan was celebrated as a great victory and solidified his reputation as a formidable military leader. 4 years later, in 1556, he captured Astrakhan, extending Russian control to the lower Volga River. These victories opened new trade routes and secured Russia's eastern frontier. Ivan's vision extended beyond expansion. He sought to reform the church and strengthen its role in supporting the state. He cultivated a close relationship with Metropolitan Makary, who promoted the idea of Moscow as the center of Orthodox Christianity. During these years, Russia experienced relative prosperity and stability. But in 1558, Ivan embarked on the Livonian War, seeking access to the Baltic Sea and the lucrative trade it offered. Initially, the campaign went well, with Russian forces capturing key fortresses. However, the war dragged on for decades, draining the treasury and exhausting the population. In 1560, tragedy struck Ivan personally with the death of Anastasia. Her sudden illness and death, possibly from poisoning, plunged him into grief and paranoia. Ivan blamed the boyars, believing they had murdered her to weaken him. From that moment, his reign took a darker turn. In 1565, Ivan instituted the oprichnina, a radical policy that divided Russia into two parts. One portion remained under traditional administration, while the other, the oprichnina, was under his direct control. This territory was ruled by his personal guard, the oprichniki, dressed in black and notorious for their brutality. The oprichniki carried out mass arrests, executions, and confiscations of land from nobles suspected of disloyalty. Ivan used the oprichnina to break the political power of the boyars once and for all. In 1570, he accused the city of Novgorod of treason and unleashed a horrific massacre. Thousands of men, women, and children were tortured and killed, their property seized by the state. The oprichnina devastated the economy, depopulated vast areas, and left a legacy of fear. Despite the terror, Ivan continued to pursue military campaigns. The Livonian War turned against Russia as Poland, Sweden, and Denmark allied against him. Famine, plague, and war combined to weaken the country. By the 1570s, Russia was in a state of near-constant crisis. Ivan's personal behavior grew increasingly erratic. He remarried several times, each union failing to bring lasting stability. In 1581, during a heated argument, he struck his son and heir, Ivan Ivanovich, with a staff. The blow was fatal, leaving him without a competent successor. This tragedy devastated Ivan and left Russia's future uncertain. His remaining son, Fyodor, was weak and unfit to rule effectively. Yet Ivan remained active in governance until the end of his life. He continued to engage in foreign diplomacy, even corresponding with Elizabeth I of England. He also patronized religious art and architecture, commissioning St. Basil's Cathedral in Moscow. The cathedral's colorful domes became one of Russia's most enduring symbols. Ivan was deeply religious, seeing himself as a defender of orthodoxy against both Catholic and Muslim powers. But his faith was intertwined with superstition and a belief in divine punishment. In his final years, he suffered from bouts of illness and melancholy. On March 28, 1584, Ivan died while playing the game of chess. His death ended a reign that had lasted more than half a century. The consequences of his rule were profound. Ivan had centralized power, expanded the Russian state, and established the autocratic tradition that would dominate for centuries. But he had also unleashed terror on his own people, crippling the economy and weakening the nobility. His policies paved the way for the time of troubles, a period of famine, war, and political chaos. Historians remain divided on his legacy. Some see him as a visionary ruler who laid the foundations of modern Russia. Others view him as a tyrant whose paranoia and cruelty outweighed his achievements. What is undeniable is that Ivan the Terrible left an indelible mark on Russian history. His reign was a study in contrasts, great victories alongside devastating failures, reforms alongside repression. The image of Ivan, both as a crowned Tsar and as a wrathful despot, continues to fascinate and haunt the Russian imagination. His story warns of the dangers of unchecked power. It also illustrates how personal trauma can shape the destiny of a nation. The boy who had been neglected and abused grew into a man who would trust no one. The ruler who sought to protect his realm from enemies often became its greatest source of fear. Even in death, Ivan's reputation loomed large over his successors. The Romanov dynasty, which began in 1613, would learn from both his successes and his mistakes. Centuries later, Russian rulers continued to grapple with the same tensions he faced, between reform and repression, openness and control. Ivan's life remains a reminder that the exercise of absolute power is as dangerous to the ruler as it is to the ruled. It can inspire great achievements, but it can also unleash destruction on an unimaginable scale. And so, the legacy of Ivan the Terrible lives on, a mixture of triumph and tragedy. His name, forever etched into the annals of history, evokes both awe and dread. The first Tsar of all Russia had transformed a medieval principality into a vast empire. Yet in doing so, he had sown the seeds of both its future greatness and its darkest chapters. Ivan IV's reign was not merely a period in history, it was a turning point. A moment when Russia's destiny was irrevocably altered by the will of a single man. That is why, more than 4 centuries later, the world still remembers Ivan the Terrible.